G'day. It's time to down your unders. Review and dissection of content from some of the sharpest minds in the game. Hosted by Adam Camilleri. Art of War. Down Under.
Hello, lovely denizens of the Warp. Welcome back to episode 210 of the Art of War Down Under podcast. We're getting on the train, the content train that everyone gets upon this time of year, right before an MFM or balanced data slate, which we assume is coming sometime in the near future, because it's about that time of year. We are used to it by now. So we're doing a freaking tier list, which I have been doing pretty regularly since I started this show, over 3 years ago. But this is the 13th of those that I will be doing. Ooh, I don't know what that means anything. I'm joined by two illustrious gentlemen. Peter the Falcon, the gentleman who got me this far, is a very busy man with a lot going on. We'll hopefully have him back on for the next one. But in lieu of that, I've reached out to two outstanding stats gentlemen. First of which being Nathaniel Herring. I love using his first name. Sounds like a fish with a top hat. Also known as the Stats Dad. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thank you. You're basically the only person who calls me Stats Dad, like, to my face. And so I always know when you're at events because I hear either Stats Daddy or Statty Daddy, like, yelled at me from across the way.
That's it. Every time. That's it. Right. I need to get my dad cuddle in. And Jeremy, also known as Curry Atkinson, my Dark Angels Inner Circle brother, from a different legion, different chapter. I don't know. But he's also joining us. Both these lovely gentlemen are from Stat Check. I did it right this time. No need to get into my DMs. Any other members of said organization? How you doing, Jez? How you going?
I'm doing well. It's going to be a fun time. I think this chat because we're sitting in a weird meta.
We're in very calm waters, which is actually weird. We find that weird as us. Analysis people of the game. When we sit in calm waters, we kind of like shrug, like, I don't know, stuff's going on, I guess. Like, people are playing the game and things are good. We kind of grasp at straws. But it's been 20 weeks since you and I did the last one, Jeremy. And a lot has freaking changed. So if you do not know how this usually goes on my show, I have kept up a living faction ladder since I started doing Art of War Down Under. And every couple of months we update it. We go through, see where things were last time we did it, discuss what the meta was like then, and then see what the meta is like now, discussing as we go factions, what they got going for them, what they don't have going for them, etc. ad nauseum. We do this unlike Art of War, the vanilla Art of War, where they do it pretty much just based on their top player level analysis. I take all opinions out of it, and we just go off the stats. So this is 100% stats based. And I'm going to turn it over to these two gents to talk about the metrics upon which they measure the success of a faction and break down any, keywords that you guys will need to know to understand what we're doing here. So who wants to pick it up?
I guess I can kick things off. I finished updating this like 5 minutes before we went live and then sent it to Nathan, so he might not have looked at it yet.
It's funny, Jeremy, because I also just sent you what I did, but I just used our normal Excel sheet and then just used Excel sorting and technology. I'm a low-tech man in a low-tech world.
We did basically the same thing. I just cleaned it up a little bit because it makes it easier to chat. But realistically, there's only a couple things that we find people asking fairly frequently what they mean. So I'll start with the most common one. Overrep or overrepresentation is the most common one that gets asked about. This one is very simply answered. It's a ratio. So the funny things that you used to do in middle school between the number of players in a faction that make up a portion of the top fours as compared to how many of those players make up like the whole faction. So example of this, say you have 100 players, you have 10 sisters players, they're 10% of the meta, but they make up 50% of the top fours. Then they're going to have a 50 to 10 or a 5 to 1 ratio. So their overrep would be 5.
Yep. So essentially, if every army was equally powerful, it would be 1 to 1. Yeah?
Correct.
If every army was perfectly balanced. So for every decimal above 1, you can assume they're overrepresented versus their contemporaries by a factor of that number.
Yep. And similarly, when you're below that, that means that you're underperforming for whatever reason.
Yeah. So we do have a change. So, Nathan, any other keywords we should go over?
No, actually, we're pretty good there. We'll probably talk about overrep quite a bit since we tend to sort our factions by it, and then usually what we do for benchmarking for overrep, if you're around one, usually within about 0.2, things are probably okay. But once you shoot over that into like the 0.2 to 0.4 or 0.5, 1.5 range, then it gets kind of messy. And then if you're over 1.5, that's when things are a bit unbalanced, or those are the dominant factions in the game by some margin.
Easy done. I have been
historically saying, oh, go ahead.
There you go. I
was going to say, historically, like the example that you use for the highest overrep is like Harlequins, who shot up to nearly like a 4, which is wild numbers.
Yeah,
wild.
That was an army that was sitting at an 80% win rate while still making up like 1 in 20 of all players at events. It was.
We may never see it. Let's hope we never see it. Such a thing.
I never want to see that again.
Never. It might be the most. It probably is the most dominant we've ever seen a single faction be since we've been tracking stats. It was the Harlequin Light meta. Towards the endish of 9th edition. But gentlemen, there is a few housekeeping things I've been remiss. Of course, it's a 2-part podcast. You want the second part of this one, go over to Art of War Down Under over on Patreon. You know all about that. But I haven't given these gentlemen a chance to plug their wares, for they have many. Whoever does the better plug, fire off.
Oh, man. Fine, I'll do it. I mean, scuffed plugs is like really the stat check way of life. It's much more on brand for us to mess them up just a tiny bit. So yeah, me and Jeremy both do Stat Check, which is on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Central and associated time zones, which is where Jeremy, I, Innes, and Anthony cover all sorts of stuff, typically the last week in 40K, plus whatever is kind of going on that is of import. So we cover things like WTC and stuff like that. Basically, the generalist stat show of the bunch. The rest of the network is Enter the Matrix, who cover team stuff exclusively. Then we got Take All Comers, who cover singles, and then I believe that we also have X and One returning, which is our dads, our 40K dads coming back. And then Innes just started up a new thing where he does like tournament recaps as an expert. So that's kind of what we're doing. And then of course we've got the metadata dashboard, which is at like stat-check.com/themeta, where you can check that out, which is a visualization of all the data we're going to be talking about today. That is all the plugs that I'm going to do.
So definitely, if you're listening to this for the first time or you're unfamiliar with the Stat Check stuff, go over to that dashboard and have that open while we're talking. And then you can just track along everything that we're saying right now, everything that we're detailing, and get the visual representations of it, because it's really, really spectacular what you guys have built. All right, gentlemen, there is going to be one change of factions on this tier list from last time. Deathwatch is deleted. In its place will be Imperial Agents, who have pretty much the newest faction we have entering the meta since Votan became its own thing.
Yeah,
I guess that was the last time I had to remove. Oh yeah, I guess breaking World Leaders out into their own. Yep, would have been.
Yeah, but like as in like first time, because you could run a World Leaders army before. You were just using Chaos Space Marines rules, and World Leaders was your detachment. But yeah, like unlike Imperial Agents, which have never really had cohesive army rules, say they still don't really have them. They are a new army in that sense.
Yeah, so it's the first time I'm going to be taking off one of these factions and adding another in quite some time. But starting off where we left off. So this is 20 weeks. So this is 20 weeks ago, episode 190. If you're at all interested in going back and seeing what the world looked like back then, we start off with an F tier. So at the bottom, we had an F tier faction, which is reserved for, in a similar way to reserved for an S tier faction, which we'll discuss in a moment. When there is clearly one faction or two factions that are so much worse than the rest, they get their own tier right at the bottom of the meta. Usually we don't have an F tier. In 9th edition, it's been unusual to have an F tier. But in F tier, last time, we had Deathwatch, who are going to be deleted from our lexicon. And then in D tier, we had Chaos Space Marines, lol, Tyranids, lol, Astartes, fair enough. That's vanilla Astartes. That is not the off-brand variants. Then we had Orcs and Genestealer Cults in our D tier. C tier was Chaos Knights, World Eaters, Dark Angels, and Imperial Knights. My, this is going to change a lot. B tier, we had Leagues of Votan, Death Guard, Adeptus Mechanicus, Drukari, Astra Militarum, Eldari, Blood Angels, Chaos Demons, Space Wolves, and Thousand Suns. Lol. Thousand Suns with an asterisk, because I believe I even remember us discussing this, Jeremy, that they were a tweener even then. Like they could be jumping up into A tier or sitting in like exclusively in a B plus tier. A tier was Custodes, Black Templars, Grey Knights, Adeptus Sororitas, Tau Empire, and then in S tier we had Necrons sitting by the Losum, because this was the absolute heyday of Canoptic Court. And the Black Templars list we were talking about there in the A tier is definitely that Ironstorm variant. So there is going to be a lot of change, because this was done, I believe, in the weeks prior to the previous balanced data slate and the previous MFM. So that's why we did it then. And that's why we're doing it now, so we can catch a snapshot of what the last 3 months of the game have looked like for everybody. I do want to talk about a couple of caveats, like I just described F tier. I would not be unsurprised if we have an F tier this one, but also wouldn't be surprised if we do. But the question is, do we have an S tier? And what does a faction have to be in an S tier, Jen? So how do you view this?
So I think I prefer the definition we talked about just like a little bit pre-show, which is a faction that is clearly dominant and will win against any other faction in an equally skilled matchup, right? So that's an S tier faction. It's a faction that gives any player, no matter what their skill level is an advantage over a player of an equivalent skill level. That means that they'll win no matter what is being played across from them. Or two, people playing F tier factions at the same points level as that S tier. Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to say, I don't really think that we have one right now.
I don't think we do either. It's
I don't think we do either.
It's something that like Eldari at the launch of 10th edition was, or similarly Genestealer Cults at the launch, where like the two of those, if they played into almost any other army, there just wasn't a game.
Yep, correct. Yep.
And since then, we've seen much less of that, thankfully.
Yes. And I think the existence of an S tier behooves a game that needs change. Whilst we are in very calm waters right now, that is mostly because we don't have one faction that just, 9 times out of 10, rolls over all opposition. So that is something good to explain now. But let us kick this off, gentlemen. Who's gonna start with the D tier for me? Oh, sorry. And firstly, I'll start with you, Jeremy. Do we have an F tier? Is there an F tier faction in the meta at the moment?
That's a tough one. I would say yes. And so I'm probably going to get lynched by their fans for this, but I'm going to say it's a Orcs.
Well, I say that in the fact that this is dispassionate. This is not opinion. This is statistical based. So you getting lynched would be very unreasonable by anyone, because that is literally the people who are playing the faction. It's your fault. They're an F tier.
Yeah,
only you are to blame.
3,200 or 1,300 games played, they have averaged a 42% win rate, and they have not won an event.
Yep. Since the MFM. Yeah, wow. I mean, a lot of us, when those changes did come out, I thought that was the most heavy-handed they've been with a nerf for a long time, because it was extensive. It wasn't just reaching and smacking around the Meganob build, the Bully Boys build. It reached further and also decimated the Green Tide in addition, which was easily the next rung down in power. And so they hit them way too hard, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't even that they hit Bully Boys like in points. They also changed their rules.
Correct.
At the same time, you also had the FAQ that GW put out that basically said that war bosses don't work when you call the wall when they're in a transport. So it was like not just nerfs, but also erratas that hit them at the worst, in the worst possible ways.
Yeah, rough. All right, D tier. Oh, unless there's something else in F tier, Nathan?
I'm going to be honest with people. Even though we've only had like 3 people play Imperial Agents, they're going to stay in F tier where Deathwatch were until further notice. And I like, they're just there until Imperial Agents players prove otherwise. They're in that spot. They don't get to leave it.
However,
Deathwatch is still an army within that book. They don't get.
Let's put an asterisk on that, because while Imperial Agents as an army may be F tier, Imperial Agents as allies, I will actually say, are probably S tier.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. That's fair.
Because they skew so many armies, make so many armies function. Insanely better than any other allied army in the game.
Why would I take 100 points of infiltrators where I can take one idiot to sit in my backfield and zone out 12 inches for like almost half the points?
Yep.
Yeah, so many things they add to other factions that I have already chucked an asterisk on there as well, because I do believe that will change. And how much? Sorry, this is a good one we should have asked. How many games do you need to have for Imperial Agents before we're comfortable putting them in a tier? Because that's going to be a question.
Usually we say 100 or so. Like right now we have 17. So
yeah. So that's just they're on the watch list for where they're actually going to end up. We'll chuck them in F tier because why not? It's funny. D tier, let us go. Jeremy, what's first in D tier?
That would probably be, I would say a three-way tie, but Chaos Knights are the first one in D tier for me.
Dang, I got to play him some more. Because Chaos Knights was the funniest one for me, because especially in the lead up to WTC, all the Europeans, constantly saying that Eldar are incredible and Chaos Knights are trash, and I was just like, I don't understand. I don't get this. Like, I mean, those were the two big ones that I identified as like, do I just feel like everyone else is wrong? And how do I think that I'm correct over all these incredible players? Turns out I was half right, because Eldari were bad, but Chaos Knights, did not shine in particular. But what do their stats look like right now? Like, what are you basing that D tier off?
So they are like dead bottom, right above Imperial Agents, if you sort the factions by win rate, overrep, and then event wins. So right now they have a 45% win rate, which is in that Goldilocks zone that we've often heard talk about on Meta Watch. They have won a single GT, and they have top 4'd another 3 events. But that means when they're making up over 3% of the meta, their overrep is a 0.29. So they are represented in the top 4 70% less than they should be.
Yeah, wow. Okay. So they just can't get it done at the top of the meta, is what you're saying? Like mid, yeah.
The only army with a lower overrep than them is Imperial Agents, and that's just because they have a 0.
Yeah. I will say in the case of Chaos Knights, I think they're suffering a lot from being a stable. So we see this a lot, especially in calm water metas. When there are just a couple of stat checks out there, there's no S tier. People refocus a lot of their things onto the things that what do I actually struggle into now that there's not like I don't have to go trying to crack Canoptic Court every other game because there's 9 bastards in my meta playing the same list. I'll just make sure I don't lose to Chaos Knights. And because Chaos Knight lists have stayed pretty much exactly the same for the duration of 9th edition, they're a very stable target. You can really zone in and like you're gonna, if you just tool yourself to kill 3 War Dogs a turn and or just not lose to stuff going through walls, like Chaos Knights aren't a thing. They're like a one-trick pony that everyone's really well versed in beating.
Yeah, and if you look at it, like their win rate is at 45%, which is
it's fine.
It's fine. They're just not converting that into anything else, and that's because they're effective at being that stat checky, that gatekeepy army. That if you don't prep for them, you will get punished. But for those that are at regulars at events, there's like a CK. Okay, cool.
Yeah, good reason for Chaos Knight players to throw it against the wall and just see what happens. Triple Rampager, do it. Do it now.
I keep saying triple Rampagers and 6 Carnivores is less than is like 1985.
That's it. Just send. Just full send. Might as well have some fun. Nathan, what is next in D tier?
It's definitely Custodes.
Yep.
Yeah, so Custodes are kind of in the same spot as Chaos Knights, where they're not like doing terribly by win rate. They're at 46.4, so they're just within the 45 to 55 window for balance. They have won an event. There's only one faction, well, 2 factions if you can count Imperial Agents that haven't won events at this point, which are Orcs and Imperial Agents, because Imperial Knights apparently just won an event this weekend.
Yeah,
so they're out of the doldrums of eventlessness. So Custodes though are next. They have that 46.4. They've won an event. They have just one more top 4 essentially than Chaos Knights and a 0.37 for their overrep. They're just not converting any of their top 10s into top 4s and kind of just not performing well. They're an army that I think suffers though even more so than other ones from just having a book that people just don't like. They find it either boring or lackluster, and so its rules just aren't supported, and so the player base has kind of left it quite a bit.
Yeah, they're dejected because the book is somewhat hollow, and unlike Curie and I, we were both lamenting a little bit about the Dark Angels Codex is virtually in the same place. We at least have like 6 whatever other detachments to fall back in the base. Marines book. Imagine it. Where would Dark Angels be right now if we could only play with like Inner Circle Task Force, Hunter, Green Wing, and Company of Hunters? That's where Custodies are right now. They don't have a fallback. They don't have a Gladius to just prop them up when times get tough. So yeah, 100% agree. All right, Jeremy, what's next?
We've got Imperial Knights, which is actually a very interesting one because they have a 50% win rate.
I think Imperial Knights are really good at the moment.
Yeah. However, this weekend accepted, they hadn't won an event. They had managed 9 top 4s, which gave them an over 0.5. So again, like we were talking about with Chaos Knights, they're one of the lowest representations in the podiums of events.
There you go. And that list they run last weekend, that was a Roll for Damage that happened in Adelaide this weekend, just gone. It was essentially a Chaos Knight list. It was War Dogs, it was Armiger Spam, and then
that's 2 events that they won this weekend.
Oh, really? You didn't know about that?
No, I was.
I heard about the Kiwi event.
Yeah.
I'm teaching these. It's down under. It's the Southern Hemisphere. Imperial Knights just crushing it at the moment. But yeah, Roll for Damage just happened, which was a near 100 player 6-rounder, and they were the only undefeated faction, where they had massed Armigers and really good Imperial Agent options. And the Warlord was in the Imperial Agents because they had no other characters. So yeah, wild. I'm learning you some stuff.
That is the funniest list I've heard in my entire life.
Hilarious.
An Imperial Knights army with no characters and just an Imperial Agents Warlord is my favorite thing I've ever heard.
They had breaches and entourage where the Warlord was, and I think some henchmen. And there may have been an assassin in there. I can't remember. And
has an entourage, 6 Inquisitorial agents, 10 Imperial Navy breachers, and then max Warglaves and Helverins.
Yeah, 6 and 6. Yep. It is War Dogs. It is War Dogs who feel no pain instead of going through walls, which turns out can just turn it up. But well done, great result there, and also over the Kiwi event, another amazing result.
Yes, that means that they've won 2 this weekend.
2, yeah. Are they going out of D tier, boys?
No, they're still in D tier. Let's not get too.
I will move them up a spot in D tier. They're now above Space Marines.
Yeah, so Vanilla Astartes going in there. But I do want to say Chaos Knights, Custodies, Imperial Knights are the 3 factions that more often than not GW has shown that they have struggles balancing. They're either too good or not good enough. And the fact that all 3 of those were virtually next to each other really is kind of hilarious to me, because in so many iterations of the game, they've been bottom tier or top tier. They very rarely sit in the C and B tier. Especially not all together at the same time. It's usually like here's 2 in the bottom, 1 in the top, 2 in the bottom, 1 in the top, or all at the bottom, all at the top, etc. Tell us about Vanilla Astartes and how poorly they're doing.
Oh man, Vanilla Astartes, you guys got problems, and being below Imperial Knights now is going to be one of them. So Space Marines suffer a lot of ways. They make up 4% of the meta. This is vanilla non-unique detachments or non-unique units, essentially.
Yeah.
4% of the meta, a 41% win rate, 2 event wins, 10 top 4s, and a 0.71 for overrep. So they're not like doing horribly. Their win rate's not great. Some of that could be a symptom of them just not being particularly, like, a lot of people pick them up as their first army. But also, it's that I think everybody has basically discovered that the unique armies with their unique data sheets just have more gas in the tank.
Yeah, correct.
Like, you're basically playing Space Marines, but without Deathwing Knights or without
Death Company or Sangard.
Sangard, or any of the characters from Black Templars. Yep. You're basically playing a hand tied behind your back version of of Space Marines at this point by playing vanilla Space Marines.
Yep. I would really like to see them go back and like make, if you're playing Imperial Fists, the Siege Force gets some more juice for you. If you're playing, I suppose the Gladius would be Ultramarines, but it would be, if you're playing Raven Guard, you get an extra rule when you play as the Vanguard, etc. I'd really like to see them do that just to add some juice to those factions, because right now there's no freaking reason to ever play White Scars Stormlance when you can play Space Wolf Stormlance. Like, okay, I can have Outriders or I can have Thundercav. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a comparison you can make.
What I was thinking about recently, and something that I heard suggested, was if you don't take a supplement or like any of the non-base data sheets that you get, or you get Armor of Contempt for your army just on, is one suggestion I've seen. Just a return to Space Marines Armor of Contempt. And that it's like a pan buff, so you don't have to alter every single detachment. But I think it would give enough in the tank for a bunch of stuff to start working again.
Man, those dev sense in the Vanguard for Ultramarines would start feeling real saucy again if they just had inbuilt AOC. Because of course you can't attach a character to them, so there's no way to make their strats free from a captain or whatever. So if you just built that in, beautiful.
Or anyway. A similar thing of like, if you don't have any named characters, you get a certain buff.
Yeah, that'd be
because
cool as well.
That fixes the problem of like, all right, you do that, you do what Nathan just suggested there, and the thing that immediately crops up is, but Calgar has the best rules.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, Calgar still holds up as one of the best special characters in the game. It's just that he doesn't bring anything special. Like if you could take Victrix Guard as a unit instead of the two mooks, and you just get like specialist Blade Guard or something with a 3-up invulnerable save instead of a and still having the good sword that Blade Guard have, like that's sick. But right now there's no reason. But there's probably like 3/4 of our audience right now that are like slamming the table in fury that we're asking for Stardy's buffs. Like, no more Space Marine anything. Piss off. And they are probably correct. So let's move on. What comes after Imperial Knights in the D tier? Jeremy.
Alrighty. We shuffled things around, so I gotta go look now. It is Tau.
Ooh, that is very interesting, because I see Tau as an extremely good army at the moment.
They are a very potent force. And I think one of the things that we're going to see is, I almost want to say we might want to move out of D tier because things start to really blend at this point.
Yep. Oh, we want to chuck Tau into C?
What do you think, Nathan?
I'd agree. I think Tau are more in C. D tier is more like where everybody's in doldrums and you don't really see the light very often. This is where we start to see double the below tier worth of event wins and stuff like that. And you jump basically 0.2 in overrep at this point as well for a lot of factions. You start jumping up into near 1 overrep for a lot of these factions.
And just to explain at this point, these gentlemen haven't sorted these factions into tiers. I guess the only opinion thing we are adding to this is where the breaks are in our tier list, where FD, C tier. We're using professional or near professional opinions and analysis to differentiate these into our tier list. So, Tau. Like, what are people mostly playing at the moment? If you guys have the detachment data, because I see a lot more red cadre than I've seen so far this edition, and I mean both Monkar, red cadre, and Calyon all seem to be legit.
Yeah, give me 1 second, and I can actually pull that up. I should have had that.
You're a maniac. Earlier. I love that you have this power. I can just throw out whimsical.
You can actually
nonsense.
All right. So for Tau, it's been interesting actually. So the one detachment that you really shouldn't try playing, and only 11 brave souls have it, has been the Kroot hunting pack, since that was also one of those armies that just kind of got taken out back and
shot in the head. Yep.
Yeah. With the chain, mainly with the changes to Pariah more than anything else.
Yeah, 100%.
But the other three, Kayun, Monka, and Retaliation Cadre, are seeing about the same level of activity as well as about the same level of success.
That's interesting.
So you have 356 Tau players in our data set right now. 93 of them were Kayun, and they had a 49.7% win rate. 120 of them were Monka, and they had a 48.3% win rate. And 132, so the highest number there, were Retaliation Cadre, and they had a 47.6% win rate.
So they're all pretty even. That speaks to some really good internal balance.
At 35%, but you know.
The true heroes. But yeah, that really speaks to the internal balance of those attachments. Yeah. That's very interesting. I love that, actually. I would much rather have 3 well-balanced attachments that are good. They're all legitimate choices than, what many.
And I think this is one of the things where like these guys are more of a C tier army than anything else, because they are consistent. And I think that they're like a couple very small tweaks from jumping 2 full tiers.
Yeah. I agree with that. Even though I think they should get a couple. I want to see them get 1 nerf. I want to see stealth suits cost a reasonable amount of points. Like just getting 3. Yeah. They can drop other points. Just stealth suits, just so good for the points. Nathan, what is next in C tier?
So I'm sure some people are going to get a little feisty about this one, but it's Tyranids. Although maybe not that feisty, because I don't think that many people are that convinced that Tyranids are an amazing faction, but that they're a very solid faction. They're sitting around. Well, they're one of the most popular factions at the moment, sitting at a 5.8% meta representation, which puts them in second for most popular faction behind Necrons. They have a 48.6% win rate. They've won 3 events. They've got 20 top 4s and then 53 top 10s for a 0. Oh man, did I just mix up 2 different factions at the same time? I did. They have 20, 65, and a 0.81. There we go. I can read Excel spreadsheets, I promise. So they're doing fine. And this is kind of one of the interesting things about Pariah in particular, and that I think people are going to start to notice, is the factions are kind of squished towards 50% a bit more than they usually are. We've only got a couple factions that are outside on the bottom end and only like 3 factions that are outside on the top ends. So we're in a different spot for win rates than we usually are. And even the factions that are outside the 55-45 are usually within a few percentage points, discounting Imperial agents, because that's some nonsense. They only have 17 games. I'm not going to include them in our distribution. But yeah, Tyranids are there. We've seen good Tyranids players have some success, but it feels like an army that requires an extremely skilled pilot in order for it to win. They don't have like a lot of punch outside of a couple of data sheets, and those couple of data sheets are Exocrines and Maliceptors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they're bad. I think they're fine, but they're definitely a C tier faction at this point.
Yeah, I'm just going back into, so they were in D tier last time. So that would just denote that the buffs they did get, changes to having a bunch of other things that work in the Vanguard detachment, having a way better Shadows of the Warp turn with all the -1s and the +1 strength and stuff has made an impact, at least that they've jumped up a tier. But
they've also jumped up considerably in participation.
I was about to say, yeah. I was going to say, it sounds like the numbers on people willing to play them has gone up dramatically as well. All right, Jeremy, what's up next?
We've got demons.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, so this is interesting because we're, like I said, the win rates are kind of flat. Like everything's kind of squished together, which is good because that's kind of where we're sitting. So there's going to be like very small differences between factions from here all the way up to like the middle of the A tier. Demons are... Oh, sorry, it's not demons.
It's Necrons, isn't it?
I know. I was just looking at my sheet and then I highlighted Necrons and then I said demons because it was above my highlight. So, and I'm gonna stick with what I just said. Everything has been flattened and the differences are very small.
That's good.
Necrons between demons and Necrons is small.
It's tiny. Like the difference between the two of them is 0.03 on overrep and 2% on win rate. And Necrons have won more events, but demons have also won a decent amount. Necrons are 6% of the meta. They're the most popular army. Demons are 4.2% of the meta, and they're like solidly slightly above average in terms of representation, which is interesting because they're not an army that has a codex. They're an army that a lot of people have been viewed as kind of having an issue of being balanced between being an ally army or their own army.
Yep.
But yeah, Necrons, the one that's actually there, they're doing fine. They have a 52.8% win rate. They've won 5 events in Pariah, and they have a 0.86 overrep because they've gotten an additional 22 top 4s.
Very good. And they were previously, 20 weeks ago, they were the only S tier army in the game. And I didn't think they took significant enough nerfs to their best stuff to see them significantly change. If you had have said in the week after Pariah Nexus, where would Necrons be in like this time, I'd have been like middle of A tier, like 100%. Maybe they got knocked out of S, but they're still going to be an A tier faction at a minimum. But having them towards the middle or the bottom of C tier is very surprising. And of course, we've seen a huge shift away from Canoptic Court. Mostly, I would actually say mostly that's meta adjustments and the injection of things like Sisters, who are extremely good at peeling away big durable things when they just slap down a miracle dice and put 8 damage on a wraith. See you later. I don't care what you feel the pain is. Stuff like that, or flexing into dev wounds at will with miracle dice. I think has been just as much a hit to Necrons as the nerfs in Pariah.
Yep. The other big thing is that the focus in the army has largely been on Hypercrypt.
Correct.
And if you just take Hypercrypt on its own, they're actually doing quite well.
Tell me more.
So Hypercrypt, there's been 377 Necron players in our set. 241 of them are Hypercrypt players.
Wow.
And they have a 54.1% win rate. And when you take out the other like 130 players, I'm pretty sure Hypercrypt has won every single one of those events.
Oh wow! Okay, that's insane. That's huge, actually. So Hypercrypt is A tier. The rest of the book, yeah.
And that's the thing. We're like, it's one of the things that we've discussed a little bit when it comes to, especially like, you know, some you have Drukhari that have 2 detachments, but for the armies that have codexes, the have and have not detachments can sometimes also be an interesting discussion because it used to be that, you know, you saw it in Canoptic and Hypercrypt, it was kind of flipped, where Hypercrypt was seeing less play, Canoptic was seeing more play, and Canoptic's win rate was slightly lower, but Hypercrypt was just doing better.
Yeah. Yep.
And the interesting thing about this, I'm just going to do one other thing, is that Hypercrypt players on average are scoring 3 points more than their opponent, whereas Canoptic players are scoring 5 points less than their opponent on average.
That's amazing. You have that stat. Like that's a crazy awesome stat. I'm going to unpack that more on part 2 because I have questions about other detachments. I'm going to start throwing at you, just windmill throwing at you. Nathan, tell us about demons.
Oh man, demons aren't really that much different than Necrons in a lot of ways. We talked about it a little bit. They're a little less popular. They're at 4.2%. Their win rate's slightly worse at 50.8, but they still have 2 event wins. They have got 16 top 4s, so they have almost as many top 4s as Necrons do. 47 top 10s, so they have a 0.89 for overrep. And overrep is the primary sorter for this, so that's why you're going to see these sorted mostly by overrep. And I think Chaos Demons are fine. I think we saw at WTC some people be a little surprised by them in teams format, but in singles, they're also fine. People have kind of started to lock in, I think, a little bit more on that. You know, if you can bring in Bloodletters with Skulltaker and maybe one of those chariot things that can pump up damage and stuff like that, that they start to just kind of run right through things with no concern whatsoever. And that, you know, greater demons like Great Unclean Ones can actually take quite a bit of punishment given the opportunity and proper enhancements, right?
And with their mobility, they have the ability to both play and deny secret missions, which have been a hugely influential part of the Pariah meta.
Yep. 100%. All right, what is next after demons? Sticking with you, Nathan.
It's, funnily enough, the original terror of 10th edition. It's Eldari. Eldari is slightly more popular by meta representation than demons at a 4.3%. Slightly worse win rate at 49.3, and then 2 more event wins. So they've got 4, and then 17 top 4s and 47 top 10s. So they have a 0.93 overrep. Eldari has fallen off.
Balanced?
Definitely.
Wow. No.
This is actually, Eldari is probably where I'd almost start B tier, I think.
Yep.
This is where we're starting to get really close to 1. I think Chaos Demons and Necrons have some flaws, and then Eldari is where you start to get into some interesting business. But yeah, Eldari are fine now. They are by their statistics like kind of right at the middle. Right where they're supposed to be. And MSU is still really good in this edition, and I think we're going to see some more of that at the top, but MSU is still very good. So is fast MSU. Who knew?
Yep. Well, so previous 20 weeks ago, they were the middle of B tier, and now it looks like they're the bottom of B tier. So that's fair enough. Meta adjustments. I think in a lot of ways, Sisters are doing what Eldari does, but better with MSU playstyles, and so they've just dropped.
Sisters also tend to do very nasty things to Eldari.
You're telling me 10 Flamer Seraphim don't just like win a game, just like bang, see you, mate. It's so spicy. Jeremy, what's after Eldari?
We've got the Guard, the Astra Militarum. They are one of the most popular factions still, with 5% meta representation. They're sitting at a healthy 49.7% win rate, so 0.4% higher than Eldari. But they have 2 more event wins. So they have 6 total event wins, 20 top 4s for a 0.93 overrep. So the same overrep as Eldari, just a smidge higher win rate and event win.
There you go.
Yeah, they're an army that I actually really like right now because with the indirect change, a lot of people said, "Oh, Guard are dead. They're not going to do any good." But at the same time, Guard also got their index, their army rules reworked. So that they, went from having an army that was designed to sit stationary and get lethals to now, no. You split the army out into two different sides. Your regiment units get lethals against anything but a monster vehicle, and your squadron units get lethals against monsters and vehicles. And so it encourages this very nice, diverse, mixed arms thing, and then usually 18 Bulgrin.
Yeah, Bulgrin are a problem. Bulgrin for the same reasons that we needed to nerf Mega Knobs, that we needed to nerf Canoptic Wraiths. Deathwing Knights and Bulgrin are the next rung down from those two things.
Yeah, they're too durable and too cheap.
Yeah, too durable and too cheap for their points. Yeah, exactly right. In saying that though, funnily enough, having played and seen Ashmore time, especially at teams lists, people are just absolutely terrified of them. Absolutely terrified of playing into guard. No one thinks that they've got crazy good greens into guard so much of the time. So
no, they're a very reliable army. They're very stable in scoring. They have really good mobility. They have amazing mission play with all the cheap units that they can put together. Even the changes where you can no longer infinitely recycle Sentinels or Kriegsmen or anything like that. It's still just, just good.
And I'm saying that because I want to say the same for Eldari. We're into the B tier. We're talking about really good armies now. We're talking about armies that feel really good and have play into the vast majority of the meta. Who went last? I think it was Nathan and Jeremy.
I have two factions that I want to squish together because it's me, and I'm going to squish them together because it's funny. So in B tier we have Death Watch.
Somehow,
you know what? I'll allow it. They have 195 games.
They do. They have 35 players, 195 games. They make up 0.5% of the meta. They had a 50% win rate. They had an event win, which was just recently before the book died.
Wow.
2 top 4s, 4 top 10s, and a 0.95 over rep.
Wild.
So they're doing great.
Death Watch that no longer exists was better than Guard. You heard it here from the mouth.
I'm putting it in brackets. Fine. All right. What was the other one you were squishing together? What was that?
Gene Stealer Colts is actually who we're going to talk about real quick.
Nice.
87 players. So they are the least played faction, other than Imperial Agents, who don't count, or for the purposes of this. Yeah. 41.6% win rate, but they have 2 event wins, 5 top 4s, and 12 top 10s. And because of their really low participation, they have a 0.95. So there is something of a caveat to slam on this for overrep. When you get to really hyper low meta representations, it can get a little inflated.
So but straight up, that is 3 dudes just crushing it.
It's really just
3 dudes crushing it. The other 32 kind of wandering around, not knowing what to do with their army.
Yeah, don't know what their lefts from their rights.
It's really just Innis, I think. Innis
and Eric. And
you
can't undersell Eric on this one.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just them. It's just those 2, and that's it.
Congrats. They took what would be an F tier faction and slapped it up 3 rungs.
I think you have to add Peter Hatcliffe to that now because he nearly went.
That's why I said 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I guess 3 armed. Yeah, it's perfect. It works. It works.
Yeah, it works. It works. When they get the 4th, they can Zoid morph into a Patriarch.
Yeah, I do think that there's something to be said about people just being totally unfamiliar with this faction when they play it.
Correct.
And a number of people will tell you that people just not knowing what this army can do if it goes really aggressive and then you roll hot on resurrections.
It's good for 15 points a game on the unknown. Yeah. People just not knowing. The same for AdMech. AdMech wields a very similar issue. But yeah, what is after GSC?
The Prophets of Corn. I'll just take it. I'm just going to take it and roll with it because we both decided to be quiet at the same time. So the Prophets of Corn are next. World Eaters, 340 players, 4.8% of the meta, a very popular faction. Who knew that being the master of a phase would make you very popular? A 52.9% win rate, 7 event wins. So this is where we start to see spikes in event wins. 21 top 4s, 55 top 10s, and a 1.02 for overrep. So they are very popular.
Yeah.
And they are starting to pull. This is where we start to pull into fairly large event win numbers, and also where we start to see numbers above 1. I think world leaders are fine though for the most part. I hear that outside of the GT environment, they can be a little oppressive, mostly because in an RTT setting where people are maybe sometimes less experienced, they can just get run over by an army whose threat range is yes.
Yeah.
but they have some hard counters kind of at the top of the game where they run into something like Deathwing Knights. Man, it really sucks to have a bunch of damage to weapons and to -1 damage stuff.
Yep.
Especially if most of you is AP2 as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, AOC and take 3 ups for 1 damage, and you just kind of giggle at them. I've had that occur. It's funny. It's funny. So yeah, World Leaders, not surprising. But what is interesting is that you talked about the 1-phase armies. So we have towards the top of B tier, we have World Leaders, the 1-phase combat army. At the bottom of C tier, we have the 1-phase shooting army in Tau. And if you had have told me that melee would be doing that much better, so like mono melee would be doing that much better than mono shooting at the start of this edition, I would have laughed you out of whatever building we were in, because of course shooting was absolute god tier at the start of this edition. But it just shows that, tripling the terrain on tables, adding plexiglass squares under everything, it goes a long way to helping the melee.
Yeah, I was going to say it was really not a symptom, because that makes it sound bad, because melee armies should also be good and have the opportunity to get into gun lines, but it is definitely a result of 10th edition shifting really hard towards even more ruins. And if you look at a GW table now versus a GW table in 9th versus tables that were used by ITC and stuff in 8th and previous editions, the amount of terrain on a table is so much more. It's wildly larger.
So the interesting thing about that is, at the very least, comparing the tail end of 9th US Open layouts to what's in the tournament companion now, the volume of terrain has actually gone down, but the count of pieces has gone up.
Yeah.
So there's less coverage, but it's more diverse, which I think is actually the better way to do it.
But in saying that, we've added the plexiglass squares, so the percentage of the table that is under the influence of terrain has stayed the same or gotten more. But you are correct. Like we have more numerous pieces, but all those pieces have a standardized. It's almost like when GW were doing it, they were like, we need a third of the board to have line of sight blocking. Like we need a third of the board to have lanes.
And this is the thing, and I know we're kind of getting lost in the weeds a little bit here, but they're
good weeds.
The end of the US Open layouts had those plexiglass bases in 9th.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But we did have almost no one else was using them. So
yeah. We did have slightly different terrain, I think. I think the focus on ruins has increased significantly more. So line of sight blocking terrain, has increased. Because in 9th we had dense terrain occasionally and stuff like that. Now we've got none of that. Yeah, we had hard cover too, and occasionally.
Well, I was just walking around WTC boards, which of course WTC is a very it's a very narrow subset of the tables we play on, but it is just like different sized L's. Everything's an L. It's just an L. L's are all that matters. Just get L's, which I hate optically as somebody who shoutcasts games and commentates and stuff, and I hate trying to bring the immersion to people and get them excited when all the tables look the same and they're just L's in different directions of different sizes. So I do hope that we can come to a place where we can diversify terrain again and have good looking tables.
I do think it's an aspect, just to harp on this weeds that we're in for a minute, of why 10th edition feels not like it's in calm waters, but it's becalmed. It's a ship becalmed in the ocean. Is that there's not a lot of
definition is a really good example of that, where you're just kind of sitting there hoping that a storm kicks up to get you out of there.
Yeah. I kind of miss forests actually, and slowing things down that way, and -1s hit and stuff like that. Yeah. I miss some of that a little bit. It would be nice to not have everything be a ruin, just occasionally.
Yeah. All right. What is after World Eaters, Nathan?
Adeptus Mechanicus, actually. 2% of the meta, so one of the least played factions in the game. 50.1% win rate, 2 event wins, 9 top 4s, 19 top 10s, and a 1.04. So they are just modestly better in overrep than World Eaters. You could probably make an argument that World Eaters are just better than Adeptus Mechanicus, but I think Adeptus Mechanicus got just a bunch of bumps from the last slate, which have risen to them being not the worst faction in the game, to them being a faction that people actually are willing to play and to perform well with.
Yep. And more than that, they're very similar to GSC, where they have a very dedicated player base that is of a very high standard of skill. because when you specialize in AdMech, you're just on this crazy roller coaster, and a lot of your interactions, similar to GSC, are pretty exclusive to your book. Like no one really does anything similar to the way AdMech and GSC play. So when you are specialized in that, you just wield a bit of extra oomph where your opponent doesn't quite know what you can do, but you still know everything your opponent can do. So it is just a nice advantage to have.
Yeah. It does also add the issue of how do I get started with this faction when it has such a low play rate and is so complicated.
Yeah, spot on. It is very complicated. What's after AdMech, Jeremy?
We got Chaos Space Marines.
Ooh, okay.
Who have actually, had a bit of a step up.
We thought they were dead, and the resurgence is on. And all the people coming at me being like, Adam said Chaos Cults was bad. Look,
pretty good.
I totally on release of that book, 100% Chaos Cults was not good. When everything that can kill hordes is completely disincentivized in your meta, look, a horde is good.
Yep.
I argue a Cursed Cultists are good in every detachment.
Unfortunately, they are.
Yeah, unfortunately they are. Yeah. I'm not sure Chaos.
The ACDC build is so common and spread amongst so many different detachments in terms of success that it's a bit much.
I argue that Chaos Cults is still not that good. A Cursed Cultists are just so good that they make Chaos Cults good.
Yeah, because generally you don't want to be taking additional leadership tests just to unlock your detachment rule.
Correct. Like someone do well with Chaos Cults with 1 or even 2 units of a Cursed Cultist rather than max, and I'll believe you that it's good. Because now
Chaos Space Marines are tied for the second most popular faction with Tyranids.
Yep.
They've managed 9 event wins. They are 26 top 4s, and they've got a 1.05 overrep.
Their win rate is what keeps them
45.7%.
Yep. That is fair. That is very interesting as well. But it's interesting that like Necrons is number 1 played faction in C tier. And also Tyranid is a number 2. And then towards the top of B tier, we have CSM. That's interesting that we see that delineation. What is after? I'm going to ask you some questions about Chaos Space Marines on the other half. Like, I want to know the win rates of Chaos Cults. I want to know the win rates of Pack Bound. I want to know the win rates of Renegade Raiders. But what is after CSM, Nathan?
It's Grey Knights. Grey Knights make up 3.9% of the meta. I think this is like we're getting it towards the top of B. We're almost to A. I think we have a few more factions that are in B before we hit A. But Grey Knights are towards the top quarter of B. With a 52.3% win rate, 2 event wins, 18 top 4s, 44 top 10s, and a 1.09 for overrep. They tend to just do better generally based on their player base. So while they may not have as many event wins, there are just not as many Grey Knights players out there, but they tend to just do better on average compared to Chaos Space Marines and other players. So, I mean, that faction's good, and it's like Hypercrypt in a lot of ways, but the Nemesis Dread Knight is just an amazing data sheet. And you have a lot of stratagem support that lets you pull some shenanigans on people and kind of pull their pants down and then run away from them when they try to get something in a position to smack you with it.
Yes. It's Mists of Demos is arguably the best stratagem in the game right now.
Yep.
It's so good. What comes after Grey Knights there, Jeremy?
We've got, and I think that this is the last of the B tier, but we've got Death Guard.
Ooh, that is good. I was surprised Death Guard hadn't come up yet, but I'm very happy to see them at the top of B. That's exceptionally good.
Yeah, so they're solid. They see a fairly low play rate. They only make up 3.5% of the meta, but they've got a 49.8% win rate. So they're like smack dab in the middle of the pack when it comes to that. They've won 3 events. They've gotten an additional 17 top 4, so they have a 1.13 overrep. So it's actually like their small representation coupled with just enough success kind of pushes them up above the rest of that B tier pack.
Because their win rate is not as good as Grey Knights, because Grey Knights was 52, they're 49. But the players that are playing them are getting proficient enough to get better results at events.
Yeah, so like as an example, just in terms of like ratios, you have 3.9% of Grey Knights, 3.5% of Death Guard. So Grey Knights are represented about 12% more, but Death Guard have won more events. Because Death Guard have won 3, while Grey Knights have only won 2.
That's awesome. I love that for Death Guard players because I felt like Death Guard have been the forgotten child of most of this edition. And yeah,
a lot of people thought that with the changes to Pariah, that with like Nurglings getting the boot, that they might struggle. But the reality is, like, most Death Guard players are still running Nurglings. They're running Brigands and Carnivores, and then like the 1,500 points, 15 to 1,600 points of their list is just core Death Guard, and it's doing well.
Yep. If you had have asked me, I would have assumed they're in, towards the middle of C tier. But yeah, seeing them at the top of B is fan-freaking-tastic for them. What is the bottom of A tier, Nathan?
It is the other prophets of Khorne, perhaps the favored prophets of Khorne, the Blood Angels. Khorne's first choice, but alas. 4.6% for meta representation. Sorry, guys. 52.8% win rate, so flirting with 53. 6 event wins, 23 top 4s, 53 top 10s, and a 1.18 for overrep. So we mentioned this again, and we're talking about very small differences in overrep, but they are kind of meaningful. Blood Angels are the bottom of A tier because despite they've won a lot of events, they've done relatively well by overrep, and they've kind of just been consistently good. We'll kind of have to see, though, with their new book coming out, whether or not that kind of is maintained, because we're going to see changes to some of their key units, right? Like Death Company right now are a terror. With 10 Power Fists, 10 Inferno Pistols, re-rolling all hits with Lamarties, so they're -1 damage. It's a lot.
I mean, a worse offender for me than them is what a Sang Priest does for assault jump pack intercessors, where you just take a unit that is in every other faction that can take them, a utility unit, and then you take it into one of the premium beaters in the game for a minuscule amount of points.
Yep. Or similarly with the Vanguard Veteran, where you just kind of go, and now this unit goes from being to kill to, oh my god, there's too many layers.
Exactly right, and it's like Vanguard vets are borderline unplayable in every other.
I would say they are unplayable competitively in every other army,
in every other Astartes faction, and then they go to a World Ender in Blood Angels. Do you? So I'm assuming because we don't have certified points in an MFM for Blood Angels, they haven't the new codex hasn't been picked up by a slew of events. If you do have any data on the new book, how's it doing?
No data whatsoever. I believe there was one event this weekend that gave their players the opportunity to use it.
Yep.
But the thing is that that's the challenge with events like that is it basically comes down to what are you actually playing?
Yeah.
And I can say right now that looking at that event, because I just quickly took a look at it, there were no Blood Angels in attendance. So if that gives you an idea of how BA players are thinking about it right now, it was a small event. So I'm not actually serious about this. There was 28 people at this event. So.
Okay. So they gave them the option to play Blood Angels or not play Blood Angels, and they chose not to. It's good as. All right, Jeremy, what's after BA?
We got my Short Kings, Leagues of Votann.
Ooh, nice to see them in A tier. Once again, another one that I was surprised didn't come up in B tier. That's where I would assume they were.
Yeah, no, they've been, and they're like definitely on the bottom end of A tier, but I could say that they're pretty solidly in there now. 3% of the meta, they have a 50% win rate. So like, I want to say not perfectly average. They have one loss more than they have wins. They have 529 wins and 530 losses. So they have won one event and they have 15 top 4s, which gives them an overrep of 1.19. So similar to Death Guard, where they have a very low representation, but that representation does regularly quite well.
So fascinating that in Pariah Nexus, they saw no changes apart from the injection of Jaegers into their lineup, an infiltrating
unit. Which is a big change.
Huge. But that took them straight from the bottom of B tier. 20 weeks ago, they were the first faction into B tier, so they were the worst faction in B tier, to now the bottom of A tier. So they jumped legitimately a whole tier just by the injection of infiltrating unit. That's how powerful that was.
Well, and the new missions. They play those missions very well.
That's true. That is true. The
infiltrators unit definitely had a huge impact on that army. Like when the price for Jaegers came out and it was 80 points, there was
crazy
some consternation amongst the groups. Was like, so their one weakness now doesn't exist.
Yep,
which was they're a fast scouting army that you could just block with a unit of infiltrators. Now they go, well, I hope I get the roll to go to drop first.
Spot on. And the Jaegers activate so many other of the data sheets abilities as well. All right, Nathan, what is after Votan?
We got Jeremy and your Adam's favorites. Dark Angels. Yep. 4.5% of the meta. Also known as faction Deathwing Knights, forever and always. A 48.3% win rate. 5 event wins, 24 top 4s, 42 top 10s, and a 1.25 over rep. This is where we start to get into. This is where we get into the land of above 1.2 for over rep. So this is where we're starting to get into factions that might be maybe too good. Perhaps just slightly too good.
It's interesting that we're going to be talking about units that are too good now, rather than us talking about factions that are too good. As in, like in index talk for 9th edition, we just literally were talking about, Custodes, GSC, Eldari, too good, fundamental, holistic nerfs, hit everything. And then we've been talking about detachments that are too good, like Canoptic Court, and now we're going to be talking about units that are too good, like Deathwing Knights. So this is how we're kind of 9th edition is progressing, where GW's doing a better job in compartmentalizing the issues.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that with Dark Angels, this came as a result of the buffs that they got.
Correct.
Like the buffs went too far.
Well, the points is the issue, because they gave us reasonable points and then buffed the crap out of the unit with extra damage and all sorts.
Well, because this is the interesting thing, is that they reduced the points on Deathwing Knights in April, and then in June put the points back up to where they were on Codex release, but buffed the unit considerably more than it probably needed.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think they're too good. I play 15 Deathwing Knights and I feel guilty. That's how I know they're too good.
If you're taking max possible of a unit, it's probably too good.
Yeah, agreed.
Like the Inner Circle Companions are probably in a fine spot now. I don't think they're too good, but Deathwing Knights are definitely too good.
I would love to see Deathwing Knights hit so much that I want to take more Inner Circle, because that unit brings me a lot more joy to play and feels a lot more fair and reasonable, whereas Deathwing Knights is just like, you either can or you can't, and the cans are very few and far between. What is after Dark Angels, Jeremy?
Why do I have to mention them? Space Wolves.
That actually sticks. Oh man, that sticks in my craw.
It's a 3-wolf moon. 3 wolves howling at the
It really is. So we can take some consolation in this, and that they'll probably get hit harder than Deathwing Knights will. Space Wolves, 2.8% of the meta, 55.5% win rate across Pariah so far, with 5 event wins and 17 top 4s. So they have a 1.41 over rep. So they make up about half the player population the Dark Angels do, but they've won the same number of events and a comparable number of top 4s, which is why their over rep is so much higher.
Wow.
And for the first, I want to say like 6 or 7 weeks of Pariah, they were the top winning army.
That's crazy.
Like after the first week, you're like, it's a fluke. After week 3, we were like,
oh no,
there's a problem here. And the fact is that they are one of 4 armies that is above 55% win rate right now. And we haven't mentioned the other 3 yet.
Yeah, obviously. I'm so annoyed that their numbers aren't very close together between Space Wolves and Dark Angels, because I'd put aside my integrity and just put them below Dark Angels if the numbers were close.
No, unfortunately, they are like by every
actually
metric better than Dark Angels. So,
dang. All right, hurts. What is after Space Wolves, Nathan?
So I'm going to continue this trend, and I think people are going to start to see what it is when I mention this army, and kind of illustrating a point that we had earlier. So Black Templars are next. 1.9% of the meta. Man, it's weird how like 3 Space Marine factions are 4 Space Marine factions are A tier factions, and none of them are base Space Marines Codex factions. Wild, man! It's almost like proving a point. 50.4% win rate, 2 event wins, 12 top 4s, 25 top 10s for a 1.5 over rep.
Now, and I will say, in Black Templars' defense, they are often playing Righteous Crusaders.
At least they're playing. I mean, Blood Angels is playing Santa Sanguinius a lot. Which is fair. And Space Wolves do at times play.
They're mostly playing Stormlance.
They are mostly playing Stormlance. That's true.
Champions of Rust is now interesting with the buffs that it got.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So at least for Black Templars and Blood Angels, you can kind of look at that and go, okay, yes, like Gladius Black Templars and Ironstorm Black Templars still exist, but the real meat and potatoes builds are Righteous Crusaders.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, is that mostly, Black Tide as we're calling it, which is the Promos Crusader spam?
It's actually mostly not Black Tide yet. I think actually we've seen in the last few weeks Black Templars kind of suffer because that list actually kind of is hard to play. And I think too many people jumped on it without understanding like all the mechanics of it.
Correct. Yep. I mean,
it's a very unforgiving list because it's not a particularly mobile list.
Correct. They saw what Olivier did, and they were just like, "Oh my god, it's OP! I'm going to auto win," and it actually
didn't see Olivier struggling to play it on 3-hour clocks at War Masters.
4 hour. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Only 3-hour rounds in War Masters, and he was struggling. 4 hour rounds, he had no issue. Which was, I mean, it was built to play at the teams event at WTC. It was built to play 4-hour rounds. Yeah. And also that man's back. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but he's got an iron core.
He's the beaver daddy. What do you expect?
He's the beaver daddy. Building dams, building Promos Crusader dams. Wall you in. Hold back the tide.
And in terms of like the number breakdown, I'll real quick give it so 120 Black Templar players, 30 of them, about 30 of them were playing Gladius, about 90 of them were playing Righteous Crusaders, and then there's a smattering that played like Firestorm, Ironstorm, and Vanguard. So it's like a 3-to-1 split. And Gladius does do better, but Righteous Crusaders just is more common.
Fair. All right, Jeremy, staying with you, mate. What's after Templars?
We've got the Sons of Magnus, the Thousand Sons. They make up 4% of the meta, which puts them at like an above average representation. They're one of the, I think, top 15 armies when it comes to rep there. They have a 57.2% win rate.
Dang. Okay.
They have won 8 events, and they have 27 top 4s for a 1.57 over rep.
Yeah, that is the first like actually problematic series of stats you put out.
This is an army that has seen multiple nerfs over the last few months. Like Pariah, they got a bunch of point hikes, they got some changes, their army rule was tweaked. They got some substantial changes. Then there was the indirect nerf, and then at the beginning of August there was the further indirect nerf where they're like, hey, we meant for you to not use flamers with indirect. Stop that.
Cease.
Cease that. And it was what was the word that Brian Seep used for it? It was like minor but notable or something like that.
Minor but notable sounds about right. Yeah.
Well, the issue is they went from they similar to Drukhari in 9th edition. They took away and then they gave because they're like, all right, we're gonna nerf a bunch of units, but here's like just this absolutely freakishly durable, insanely multimodal vortex beast for you to enjoy in the meantime. And so it was just a pivot for them. They went from power to power. In fact, I think they're playing a much more proactive game now than they were previously. Whereas previously you'd see them do nothing for 2 or 3 turns, and then Magnus would come out turn 3 after you've doom bolted away 2 things that could have killed Magnus, and he just kind of runs you over whilst you unbelieve crystal at the same time and all this other crap. Whereas now they're like pushing the board a lot more. They're applying a lot more pressure to the table, and in response, their opponents get to do more into them. So I'm finding that people are complaining about Thousand Sons less, but they're winning pretty much the same or more.
Yeah. And it's also one of these things where with the changes to Pariah, they also are a very powerful secret mission army.
One of the best.
You can just sit back and like, okay, we're playing Purge. All right, I'm just going to sit on my one objective. I'm going to get a kill. I'm going to hold one objective.
Correct.
And then at the end of the game, I'm going to go put Magnus on your home objective.
Going first for Thousand Sons is the freaking worst.
It's terrifying. And I say this as someone who played them at War Masters and at WTC this year.
Yeah. It's the worst. Because I do believe they are. I mean, it's them or Red Cadre are the 2 best secret mission armies in the game at the moment, because it's just so freaking hard when the chips are down to stop a solo commander possibly uppy downy onto your home objective turn 5 if you go first into him. And Magnus is even worse because he gets the double move. It's so much harder to stop the double move than a 3-inch deep strike. All right, especially when Magnus comes up and he blows up 4 units and then he freaking goes into your objective. What is after Thousand Sons, Nathan?
This is the faction that is the most debatable among both like the other hosts on our show as well as on Art of War, the base network, not Down Under, obviously.
The hallowed
where they were, where they've been, the hallowed Down Under, the content that I personally listen to. And then who put them in D tier on base, I think, or something like that. And statistically, Drukhari is in second place.
I already wrote them in, mate. So just so you know, I do not have these boys' Excel spreadsheet, and I knew what they were talking about because the furor, the discussion, the water cooler talk has been so thick around Drakari. Tell us the stats, Nathan, because these are impressive.
So they're not a very popular faction. Drakari, even when Drakari were really good in the Thick City days, they weren't especially popular. They're at a 2.6%, puts them at kind of the bottom third of army representation. They have a eye-watering 58.5% win rate, which is the highest win rate among factions at the moment. They have 9 event wins, 19 top 4s, 52 top 10s, and so just so that you know, they have as many top 10s as Necrons, with like almost half the player base, basically.
That's insane.
Or less than half the player base.
And Necrons is the most played. Yeah, exactly.
Correct. And they have a 1.71 over rep. So they are well into perhaps we have a problem territory, and almost into please turn this train around. Or in this case, please turn this venom around. But the biggest argument that I see a lot of people get into with this faction is that a bunch of people who we know just don't understand how this faction continues to win events in an entirely like hazardous meta for the main component of the army list, which is the venom. Yeah. Like Magnus looks at 3 or 4 venoms and kills all of them, basically.
Yeah.
Like in a turn. And turns off the Drakari army's rules, basically, because most of this is Splinter Fleet. Splinter Fleet's rules basically entirely operate off the idea that transports exist, and you need to come out of transports to turn on your things. But this army is really good. I like the consternation from people is that the army is built around delicate transports, and those delicate transports die. But currently, we exist in a situation where tables are covered in ruins that block line of sight. MSU is really good. They have one of the best shooting platforms in the game in Scourge, who can shoot, pop behind cover, and then you just never get to interact with them. They have excellent melee trade pieces still, who are very delicate, yes, but they can trade well. And otherwise, they're just everywhere and nowhere all at once. It's an army built for the current state of play, where it has just enough firepower to keep your opponent like on their toes while being all over the table. They play more like old Harlequins do in a lot of ways.
They play a lot more like Harlequins. So they were towards the bottom middle of B tier last time we did this, and now they are sitting towards the top of A tier. And I want to say the biggest reason they're able to do this is the indirect nerfs, because they never got to stage. The Splinter Fleet never got to activate when someone just double manticored a Venom and then basilisked the freaking witches and Lilith. Lol. So you're never going to make combat. Whereas now they get full power to stage, full power to wield their rules. They are empowered by pain right now. I think they're in a great place. All right, I'm so proud of that. I think do we have 2 factions left or 1 faction left?
Just 1 faction, and it is the obvious one.
Yeah.
I guess since I'm already
Bringers of Lame.
Bringers of Lame.
Oh no. All right. So we have Eldar, but better. Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Sororitas, or basically just the Bringers of Flame detachment with some other stuff that we don't care about. 349 players, 4.9% meta representation would push them just below the most popular factions in the game. So they're quite popular, which makes the rest of their stats significantly more horrifying. They have a 56.4% win rate, so they're 3rd in win rate, just behind the other 2 factions in the top 3. Essentially, they have until recently had the same number of event wins as the other 2 in the top 3 combined. Now they have 16 event wins, so they're just 1 off of that number. 38 top 4s, 73 top 10s, and a 1.8 over rep. And this is considering that not everybody is playing Bringers of Flame. And Bringers of Flame is the most powerful faction in that, which is really funny because I think when the Codex first came out, people were much more on board with other things in that book.
Well, that was before we got the MFM. Realized this dropped right before the MFM, before we had points for, because the points in the back of the book, Penitent Host was going to be the best faction in the game, STR undeniable.
And then they said, what if we made Repentia 180 points?
180 points. It was the right thing to do, everybody. It was the right thing to do.
Oh, 100%. It was the right thing to do, but it was way sadder for everybody who was staring at it and being like, it would be really funny if 10 people without any clothes on ran across the table and murdered everything else.
And just one-shot Magnus, with some overkill. Legitimately, just so you guys know,
happened to me at a practice game.
I got the Sisters book about, I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks early, and I was planning to take some weeks off 40K, just sit back. This thing's going to launch. The game's going to be in a terrible freaking place, and I'm just gonna I'm not signing up to this event or this event. I'm going to spend time with family. I'm going to do some other shit. Maybe I'll take a weekend away and recuperate. And then the points come out, and I'm like, I'm going to sign up for everything. What's on? You sign up for it.
They actually
back on.
They're still too strong.
Yeah,
but the reality is that they at least they aren't an S tier army. We had this discussion at the beginning of the cast. 5 out of every 6 sister players are playing Bringers of Flame.
Yep.
And if you just look at Bringers of Flame, their win rate goes up another 5%.
Yikes. Yep. So they're crossing they're 63 or something? No, 50, 62.
61. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's problematic.
So they're definitely not balanced. And so we talked about this a little bit last week amongst us and the hosts, is that it's not a points change that I think sisters need. They need rules changes to Bringers of Flame.
Straight up, yeah. Triumph is points. Probably Seraphim is points. But I want to see them have less freaking miracle dice. It's just infinity miracle dice. What did we not learn about fate dice that we're so comfortable with? They started with infinity, and by turn two, they you might as well have infinity of every option for sisters most of the time.
Maybe you should have a hand size.
Yeah,
so you can never have Magic, you can 7 or something. 5 probably is a reasonable number. 5 miracle dice, and that's it.
Yeah. And any furthers you can replace or discard. Yeah, I like that actually. That's a good one because I get to I cast stream sisters tables, and I'm like, well, he's got every dice he could ever want from turn 3. There is nothing you cannot do.
He's got 12 miracle dice in front of him, and he's got at least 2 of 4s, 5s, and 6s. Great.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's just too much. There's too much certainty that they play with. So there isn't an S tier. I think we're already clear with that. There is no faction that is so much better than everybody else that it needs to be delineated out. But is there an A+? Should we do something like that for this one?
I'd probably say sisters are the one there.
Yep. So sisters would be the A+.
Yep.
All right, so let us recap this before we sign off. That is our tier list for this, recording 15th of September, 2024. In the F tier, we have Orcs and Imperial Agents with an asterisk because we don't have enough data to accurately place them as of yet. In D tier, we have Chaos Knights, Custodes, Vanilla Astartes, and Imperial Knights. C tier, we have Tau, Necrons, Tyranids, and Demons. B tier is Eldari, Astra Militarum, Deathwatch in brackets. GSC, because that's where Deathwatch is leaving us. They're leaving us from the B tier. GSC, World Eaters, Adeptus Mechanicus, Chaos Space Marines, Grey Knights, and Death Guard. And then A tier, I'm so proud of Death Guard. Players, I'm just going to say that right now. Every now and then I like to give a faction's player base a shout out. Death Guard, you guys have gone through some of the most boring and stale times with your book, and you guys are still chugging along. Well done to all of you. A tier, we have Blood Angels, Leagues of Votan, Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Templars, Thousand Suns, and Drakari. And then in the A+, we have the Adeptus Sororitas. So wild. So where did all our Space Marines bunch up previously? So in B tier previously, we had Blood Angels and Space Wolves, and then Templars were in A tier. And then in C tier, we had Dark Angels. And now they're all together in A tier. Kind of scary. But gentlemen, please feel free to pontificate with some closing thoughts on how you feel about this tier list.
Meta feels pretty good. It can always be better. We're never going to have a perfect meta. I don't think we ever will. And if we will, we'll still find something that we can do better about it. But compare this to where we were a year ago. and it's clear that they've put in the work.
Yeah.
Because we're in a position where we've seen 10 codexes now.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't had the problem that we had last year or last edition.
Yeah.
Where every single time a book came out, it was this arms race to break it, to figure out how to fix it, work around it, what have you.
Exactly right. We went from broken codex to broken codex for like the last 18 months of... the last 2 years of 9th edition. Essentially, Drukhari came out, and then we were in a rolling maul of absolute nonsense.
Yeah, it was Drukhari onwards was just the the very rapid descent into madness.
Exactly right. And even then, though, it was still better than some of the low points of 8th edition. And 9th edition, for the most part, has been, apart from like the first, 3 to 4 months where things were a little bit all over the place, has been pretty reasonable. I do say it's funny that when we find ourselves in a reasonable place, we don't know what to do, and we kind of be like, oh, nothing's broken. Am I bored? I don't know if I'm bored because I've never been here before. I've never had to sit still this long. We're not comfortable sitting with ourselves in the meta. But Nathan, closing thoughts, mate.
I think the meta's all right. This is, like Jeremy said, the best meta that we've had so far in 10th edition. Everything is tighter. We talked about it a lot while going through the tier list. Like, the numbers are pretty close. The major outliers are factions that nobody plays, which is Imperial Agents being at 32.4% for win rate, and we'll see them balance out. They'll go into other places. That codex is mostly meant as like a allies for Imperial faction and not necessarily 100% as a standalone faction. And we'll probably see how that representation turns out into like components of winning lists. But otherwise, outside of a few, like the A and A plus tier probably needing a bit of a tap, and things that are at the bottom kind of needing a bit of a bump. I think philosophically, though, Imperial Knights, Custodes, and Chaos Knights are probably around where they should be. GW's always had problems balancing those factions.
Correct.
And I'd rather that they were not as good, preferably to the previous times where they've been way too good, especially Custodes. That army goes to like 12% of the meta way too fast for it to ever. I've seen it happen too many times. We started tracking stats when Tau and Custodes released in 9th, and they rocketed up to together 1 out of every 4 armies being either Tau or Custodes. And we don't need to return to those dark times, folks. We don't need to. So this is fine.
Agreed. This is fine. We're going to cut it here for part 1, go over to part 2. We're going to talk about what needs to change for those top and bottom factions. We're going to mix it up in the middle, answer some Patreon questions, and hopefully you will come and join us. Jeremy, Nathan did the first plug. You do the second plug. Tell us where they can find some stat check goodness.
Yeah, for sure. So you can check us out at stat-check.com. That's where we have the metadata dashboard. It's where we occasionally will publish articles, very infrequently nowadays. But more often than that, we have all of our various shows that we do. So if you can check us out at YouTube, it's just youtube.com/statcheck. Every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 9 p.m. Pacific, and I think like 8 a.m. one of the Australian times.
It is. Yes, it is. I catch a little bit of yous every week.
Appreciate it. You can check us out. That's the main show. We're live every week. We talk about the last weekend's happenings and stats, some of the things that we've been involved with, and if there's any interesting developments in the meta. And every now and then we'll just vamp about things that are interesting. This past weekend, or week rather, we talked about things in previous editions that would be interesting to bring back, or that would shake things up a little bit, since we are, as we said, in the doldrums. And then we have, Nathan mentioned the other ones, but we have a plethora of other shows. We have the wonderful Steve Joel from New Zealand, who has Champions of 40K on our network. We have the Take All Comers boys, who play an inordinate amount of Warhammer, even for someone as myself. And then we have I'm drawing a blank right now. The X&1 boys, who are currently on hiatus, but hopefully will be returning soon with their lovely Dad Hammer. Oh yeah, we have Entered the Matrix. I'm out of WTC season, so I completely forgot that exists as the show. Enter the Matrix is, of course, our teams-focused show.
Yeah,
and since show. Teams is all of the rage these days, definitely go check that out. I've just checked out of Teams right now.
Nice. Well, yeah, team season is coming to a close. We're into the pointy stuff where we've got WCW and LVO on the horizon, also LGT coming up. So the 3 biggest singles events in the world are pretty much coming up in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months. And on that note, we're going to go over here and record part 2. Hopefully you've enjoyed this update to our living faction ladder. And yeah, take care, look after each other. See you next week.